Cam, the moment has arrived. Something we've been preparing for what feels like an eternity. But they say good things come to those who wait. Joining us, yes, they do. Joining us on the show this week, he is a producer, a writer, a humorist. He loves to keep the British end up, and he's not the biggest fan of quiche. It's the one and only Mr. Bruce Feirstein. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, guys. How are you today? It's good to see both of you. I am a big fan of the podcast. I listen to it.
That's all I needed to hear from this.
Yeah, we're done.
We're done.
We're done. We're done. Goodbye. See you later.
I've peaked. I've genuinely peaked. There we go. As I joked just briefly in the intro there, yeah, we've been back and forth for many years, so I'm glad we can finally make this happen. We have so many questions for you, from where you started to what you're working on now, that we can talk about as well. Very exciting stuff. But I want to start by taking us all the way back to young Bruce, because I think that story has a little bit of 007 in it, and I think it leads to where you are now. What was your first experience with James Bond?
Was my first experience with James Bond? I must have been 10 years old or 11 years old in the back seat of a Chevy Impala at a drive-in in Livingston, New Jersey. And I remember seeing Goldfinger. And that's the first Bond movie I ever saw. Did I miss something here? Is there some story that
No,
it's an origin story.
Yeah, I just like it's funny how I find how Bond and spy movies, which is kind of our thing, but Bond specifically here, just tend to intersect our lives, and it's funny how it sort of stayed with you throughout your career.
Well, yeah. There's two interesting things about that. First of all, I remember buying the T-shirt, and it was a yellow T-shirt with the gun. Mm-hmm. And I must have been 10 or 11 years old. And flash forward now 40 years, and I am at an Oscar party, and I come face to face with Sean Connery, and it's the first time we've met. And it's a funny exchange that goes on, which I can talk about later. But actually, I'll tell you what it was. I came face to face with him, and I looked at him, and I just, it's like I couldn't believe it. There's Sean. I had my son with me, my then infant son, and I threw him up on my shoulder, lifted up, and there was Connery. There was the man, the icon, the god.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr...
Bond. James Bond.
And for some reason, I just looked at him and I said, "You're Sean Connery. You were in a couple Bond movies. I'm Bruce Feirstein. I wrote a couple Bond movies. You and I need to talk." And Connery looked at me like no one had talked like this to him in, half a century, and ended up saying, sure, come and we'll talk. And we ended up having it was the beginning of a friendship. But during the conversation that followed, and we were talking about the Bond movies, and we were talking about my daughter and my son, and he and I were about to work together on the Bond video game of From Russia with Love, which he was in, and he told me he was doing it for his grandchildren. But the whole time, all I could think about was, how did you get here from the back of a Chevy Impala in 1963? It was this weird out-of-body experience to go back then and to kind of, it's that thing. I've never had an experience like that where you just wonder, how did this happen? What am I doing here?
Mm-hmm. I would say it's like sometimes they say don't meet your heroes, but I'm glad to hear that Sean was what you hoped for. Like I hope that was a good meeting. That was a pleasant meeting.
I've been very lucky in that I've met all of them except Lazenby. And every one of them has been very nice. I have nothing bad to say about any of them. And I was worried about Connery because Connery was known as being prickly. But somehow that afternoon, all the words came and everything was right. And it was funny when he said, "So you wrote all those films?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I have only one question." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Did you cash the check?" Which,
Well, you probably disarmed him because, he would be used to people coming up being like, "You are James Bond. Oh my God." And he's like, I know. But the fact that you were like, yeah,
yeah.
you said,
Later on, when I went and talked to him, I had my daughter. I had my twin children. My daughter, who at the time was about 4, and she's on my knee, and I'm sitting next to him, and we're talking about the films. We are not talking about fan stuff. We're talking about other. We're talking more about what it's like to be in this circus, and it was not exactly what you said, Cam. It was not, oh my God, that's not what it was. But at one point, he's looking at Elizabeth and he's looking at me, and I had said something complimentary about him in the movies, well, I'll tell you what I said. We were sitting there, and I said, well, I got to tell you something, that when I started this, the only voice I ever heard was yours. And he looked at me, and he didn't answer it. Instead, he looked at my daughter, he looked at me, he looked at my daughter. My daughter looked away, and he looked back at me and says, I think she's flirting with me. And I looked at him and I said, well, somehow I think she's not the first. And at that point, he looked over and it was like, okay, this is going to be okay. We're going to be friends. I mean, Connery was great. It goes back to that thing about in my opinion, every Bond has been the right Bond for their time. And Connery was absolutely, the Bond he created was perfect for the Cold War. And then you come along, and I can't talk about Lazenby because I don't know him, but then comes Roger. And one of the things you hear criticism about, well, Roger played it like this. Well, if you were Roger Moore and you're stepping into this role following a man who was like the world's greatest, sexiest panther, how are you going to distinguish yourself? And so this leads to the choices that Roger made. And in a way, Roger, who was an unbelievably great gentleman, and kind of, it's not that he lived the role, but he enjoyed it. You know what I mean? He liked being, and he was very, very kind and nice to me. And Roger came along and played it the way he played. Then there was Tim, and I have kind of an acquaintanceship with Tim. And Tim's another one who was a great guy. Then you get to Pierce, and finally Daniel Craig. And I've only met Daniel a couple times, but it has always been, that secret kind of handshake. And we had a nice and I liked him. And again, once again, if you go back to it, Pierce was the perfect Bond for the Soviet Union has fallen. Tim was the perfect Bond for the end of the Cold War. Tim is the end of the Cold War. I'll get this right. I should do the whole run, because the whole run is that. Yeah, I'll get it right. Roger was the Reagan era, bell-bottom pants.
Yeah.
And then comes Tim, who's Berlin Falls. Then comes Pierce, who now the Soviet Union is fallen. And then comes Daniel, who is post 9/11. And each one of them kind of reflects that era. And the other thing that the fans kind of don't think about is that when these guys approach this role, it's not only how am I going to play it, but how am I going to make it different than the last guy? And so it's a tough, I'm glad I didn't have to do that. I mean, those are big shoes to step into for each and every one of them.
Well, you mentioned Pierce, and I want to take us over to those films in a second, but I can't let this moment go by without bringing up a book you brought out quite some time ago that I have a copy of sitting in front of me here. It's right here. It's the British edition. So there's a slightly different part for us Brits, which I always find quite hilarious. But what I wanted to know, obviously there's a little story behind the book, Roman Don't Eat Quiche. Where did that come from? And did you enjoy the little joke in A View to a Kill that was sent back for the quiche?
Et voila. Quiche de cabinet.
Sounds interesting. What is it?
An omelette. Ah, you were telling me about your grandfather.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Obviously, I thought it was funny. The book came about because my career was that I started in advertising. I did political advertising. One afternoon, I turned around and I realized, no, you know what? I don't want to be writing the ads. I want to be writing the stuff between them. And at that point, went off and started an Over the Slush pile at Glamour magazine, started submitting stuff, which eventually ended up to working on the editorial page of the New York Times. But via New York Magazine and a whole bunch of other things, and a long time at Vanity Fair. But when I made that decision, I wanted to get out of advertising, I started writing scripts, a script. And we all had, John Hughes was the god at that moment, and John Hughes was another guy who got out of advertising. So I was working for New York Magazine, and I wrote a story about a bar on First Avenue about singles. And the story then, the magazine piece sold to the movies. And I was hired to write the script. And in the script, I had two single guys at a bar, at a kind of a pickup restaurant bar in Manhattan, and bemoaning their love lives and their failures and all that. And the waiter comes over and says, "What are you going to have?" And one of them says, "I'll have quiche." And the other one looks and says, "That's your problem. Real men don't eat quiche." That's where it comes from. I then turn that in and I write that into the script. That's in the script. The producer at Columbia Pictures circles this and says, "This is what's wrong with the script. It's not funny." So this is like a red flag in front of a bull. This is not what you do. So I turn around and I write it. I say, well, screw you. And I ended up writing it as a magazine article, a funny magazine article for Playboy magazine. And I never expected it to take off the way it did. The very long and the short of it is that, as with most things in life, it was a question of timing. I was very, very lucky that at that particular moment, there was a guy named Phil Donahue who was tremendously overexposed, who was kind of this sympathetic, warm, and it may well have been genuine, but it felt performative. And so I was lucky in that, I made fun of him in the book. And the 3 weeks before, there was a book about masculinity, and a month after, there was a book about masculinity. But somehow this one grabbed the brass ring. And I always knew, I would tell everyone around me, this is not a repeatable event. This is a comet, and this is not going to happen again. So when the question always comes up about, well, why didn't you repeat that? Did you ever? No, you couldn't do that again. That was like the stars, the sun, the moon, and too many things outside my control came together and smiled on me. So that's the explanation for how that book came about. And I sometimes get asked now about, would you do it again? And I recently went through this with National Public Radio in the United States, where, oh God, I had to negotiate with them for 3 weeks about that they would say that it was a satire, that they would say it was a satire, that they would understand that I wouldn't do this today, that I don't think it's productive today to divide the world into quiche eaters and not quiche eater, and that kind of stuff. And it ended up not running for a bunch of reasons, but it was a book very much of its time. And I always find it funny when people kind of, well, it was anti-gay. No, it wasn't anti-gay. In fact, it said there was some reference to that, and no, that's not true. So it has been widely misread and taken as a people still get outraged about it, and you just want to say, yeah, chill out.
Yeah, that's okay. That's never how I took it. I recently reread it in front of a family full of very passionate feminists that I'm married to, and they all found it a riot. Found it a great read. I read loads of passages to them. I think it still holds up now. So I think there's a magic in that book.
Yeah, well, and I can still do the jokes. In 2025, the jokes are easy. The romance idea of a safe space is the cockpit of an F-15. I mean, these are like, I can roll these. I can roll these off forever. I know how to do that. What's a real man's trigger warning? Drop it or I'll shoot. You know what I mean? But you just don't want to go there about, a real man's pronoun is sir.
You're giving away good content here. This is the next book.
Sir, Captain, Chief, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
so you asked. That was how that came about.
Yeah. Well, it was. I wanted to know because it's a book I've read. I have a dog-eared copy sat here, but let's guide us into the Bond of it all then, because I imagine around about 1993, 1994, a conversation happens and your world slightly changes and you become involved in the world of James Bond. Where did that happen? What was that first conversation that brought you into the family?
There were two things. It was, I had known Martin Campbell through my wife, who was a studio executive. And so, but that's off to the side. Barbara Broccoli's husband, Fred Zolo, is a very, very well-known producer. And Fred and I were pals from forever. And Fred was going to produce a romantic comedy that I wrote. It turned out that it never got made or anything. And it was a weird time in my life because I had moved back, having totally washed out and utterly failed in California as a screenwriter. I had moved back to New York and would hang out. And I had a newspaper column, the New York Observer. I know all this sounds like fortuitous. There was a lot of, it wasn't easy. And I was working part-time for the New York Times, and Barbara and I would go out to dinner. And one afternoon she called and said, and I kind of knew Cubby. I had met Cubby through Barbara and Fred. And one afternoon Barbara called and said, how'd you like to come to London and write some witty dialogue for Bond? And
hard question.
Yeah, hard question. When do I leave? And I met Michael Wilson, and Cam Martin I already knew, kind of. And I ended up rewriting the entire script. No, except, here's the thing about that. There are three names on the script. One is Michael London? No, Michael...
France?
France.
Yeah, Michael France. And then Jeffrey Kane, and then me.
Yeah.
It doesn't work without the three of us. And I am sometimes unfairly given more credit than I deserve. The late Michael France, who was a great writer, who came up with the basic idea behind this, that the Soviet Union has fallen, and Trevelyan, 007 agent, a 00 agent, has turned against Bond. And then Jeffrey came in, and Jeffrey really put it together what you see. And Jeffrey did an amazing job and deserves, and he gets first position credit. He's a great writer. What I did is I came in and I looked at it, and they expected me to do something funny, and instead, I can write funny and I know how to do that. But when I looked at it, and I said, the problem here is that there's no kind of overarching idea on this. And they looked at me and said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I don't know. My feeling is the problem with the script is that we should go through it and everything should be about the world, the way the world has changed, and Bond hasn't. And so that affected every single scene in the movie. The first change I made was the first shot you see of the movie, which is there. That was, we got to bring back the DB5 because that tells us who we are and where we came from. And then you go through the entire movie, whether it's M or Moneypenny, all through it, the idea is that the world has changed, but Bond hasn't. And so, this leads to, as I said, this leads to M calling Bond a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. This leads to Famke Johnson, or whatever her name was. I'm embarrassed by the name we used.
Oh, come on. Be proud. Be proud of that one. Xenia on a top.
Xenia on a top. Xenia on a top. I know. That's mine. That's my problem. I'm guilty as guilt. I'm not guilty of Christmas Jones. Christmas Jones is not my fault. But Xenia on a top is mine. And where she says you don't need the gun, Commander Bond, and he says it depends on what your definition of safe sex is. I mean, I'm guilty of that stuff. So at the end of the day, I had significantly changed the script, but I could not get there could never have gotten there without the amazing work of Michael France and Jeffrey Kane. They are the late Michael France. They were great writers, and I was lucky.
Well, I was going to ask because you're joining this Bond film at a time where basically you have the handoff from Cubby Broccoli's, spearheading this franchise to Barbara and Michael overseeing it. And like, did it seem like a very stable environment, or still like they were trying to figure out their own process for making Bond films?
No, there was Michael's got a cameo in Goldfinger.
Yeah,
and
true.
Michael's been there forever, and Barbara's been there forever, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew, and they were they were always definitive. I think maybe people thought, well, do they know what they're doing or not? But when you turn around 5 years later or 15 years later, you turn back and you say, Barbara and Michael took this franchise someplace Cubby could have never imagined. And in the course of doing it, made it completely their own.
Totally.
So, yes, there was never a moment of, I don't know what to do, I don't know this. No, they both knew exactly what they were doing.
And one of the things they did was, when it came to Daniel Craig, really reinvented the franchise, right? When you are joining with GoldenEye, and that is a new actor you're launching, a new approach to Bond in the 90s, was there kind of a sense that they were looking to kind of reinvent Bond, or were they looking at that point to just continue what had been happening, from the previous decades, but just kind of like slightly alter it for a newer audience?
Those were concerns, but those were not the real concerns. The real concerns were it's been 6 years since there was a Bond film. Is there an audience? And the studio did not necessarily believe there was an audience. I remember like 3 weeks before we were shooting that John Calley, who was the president of MGM at that moment, wasn't sure whether they were going to greenlight the movie. I mean, the sets were built and things were going, but MGM was not sure. And Barbara and Michael were facing that. I mean, internally, they were facing skepticism on the part of MGM. Is this thing still relevant? And then you kind of get to the outer circles of, is Pierce going to be Bond? Is that going to be any good? The movie's going to... So I think the real crush on the inside was, we have to make this movie on time, on budget. It's got to be great. And the franchise is riding on this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to, not them, but the new producers are going to face the same thing, because it's been so many years since the last movie, and the speed of that culture moves at now. I'm sure it's going to work. I'm sure it's going to work, but I'm sure that there will be people writing, is Bond still relevant? Is there an audience for it? And you can't really tune out that noise. Mm-hmm. I hope that answered the question. Did it, or?
Yes, definitely
you got
did.
it. You got it.
Bang on.
Well, I think that also has led me into my next question in the sort of GoldenEye sector of your three films is Brosnan. We mentioned him briefly before. He's taking over the role. He did briefly have it for about 10 minutes in the 80s, but you're getting to write for a new Bond, and I'm sure there are plenty of lines that are yours in the film. But what was it like also getting to have your fingerprint on a new James Bond? Was that a daunting task for you, or were you sort of, no, this is great, I get to sort of form him myself?
There was not time to even think about any of that. When I arrived in London like October 12th, we started somewhere in October. We started shooting in January. I was working 7 days a week, like 12 hours a day, turning in pages all the time. And in that moment, I was never thinking about, I was never thinking about like Yeah. One of the things, a whole bunch of over the years, as I've talked to other Bond writers, we all just say the same thing, that you walk around London and at one point or another you hear this you just hear it in your head because there you are walking around in this and you can't quite. It's mystical and you can't quite believe it, and but no, you're not actually thinking about, I wasn't thinking about, oh, I'm going to be able to change the ship or anything. I just wanted to have them approve the pages.
You're in the micro as opposed to the macro. You're just dealing with the day to day. Yeah.
You're
Completely.
totally in the moment. That's the best way to put it.
Well, then I'll reframe it slightly. You're in that moment. You're day to day. You're just putting in pages to hopefully get approved to move to the next fire to put out or deal with the next issue. What was something maybe when you look back on GoldenEye that you were particularly proud of that you just sort of came up with on the spot and that made the film? That's your fingerprint on the film.
Obviously, M, and the way M came about was the way M came about is, and this is what it was like. Barbara picked me up at 5:30 in the morning at the hotel. We got to the studio about 6:30. Martin was already there, and I go in to talk to him, and he says, "Well, what do you want to do about M?" And I say, "I don't know. It's a bunch of white guys sitting around talking." And Martin thinks for a minute and goes, "Stella Remington over at MI6. Let's try her as a woman." So we're now at 7:05 in the morning. 10:30 in the morning, I go give him the pages. And Michael says, and Barb, not Michael, Martin says, "Yeah, this is good. Let's go with this." And yeah, this is where it calls him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur and all that.
You don't like me, Bond.
I then proceed to write 31 drafts, I think. 31 different drafts of this thing. Wow. Because this person had an idea and this one wanted this and this one wanted that and this one wanted that. And finally, Campbell said, "No, we're going to shoot what he wrote the first morning." And what you see on the screen is what I wrote in 3 hours after getting the idea, with, I think, one word difference. There's stuff. I remember there's very funny things that went on during the shooting of that. Like one morning, Barbara and I show up at the studio, and there's a bunch of what's the UK military? It's
RAF or the army or
there's a bunch of army guys outside, right. And they go, "What are you doing? What?" And she rolls down "What are you here for?" And it turns out that a satellite had overflown the studio a couple nights before, and they wanted to know what we were doing with Russian tanks and MiGs in the middle of Watford. And it was. There was just funny stuff like that. There was a great producer named Tom Pevsner who one morning walked into my office and said, "I hate to bother you, but would you mind changing the British frigate to a French frigate?" And I look at him and I go, this is the most insane question I've ever had. Why? Let's go, why? He said, "Well, because the French will lend us a frigate in Monaco, but you're killing a Frenchman on it, so they would like the guy who gets killed to be Canadian, because the French don't like the Canadians."
Uh-oh.
Sorry, Cam.
Do you mind doing that? It would have been hilarious if I had turned around to the screenwriter and said, "No friggin' way." I don't know. But it's and all day long I would sit in my office and there would be model MiGs flying overhead. But when I say model MiGs, I mean 10 feet long, huge things. And all day long they would be crushing Russian Lada, LADA cars outside. And I look outside with a tank, and I look outside and I go, "What are you doing?" And I forget who it was, but somebody turned to me and I realized, what they're doing is they're trying to figure out the most aesthetically pleasing car crush. And so they're practicing. And then movies, you learn so much on them. So I remember being in the editing and we're watching the tank chase. And by the way, writing the tank chase. The tank chase was I didn't know what a T-junction was. The tank chase is 18 pages of script. Every
Wow.
single beat in it was, which was the way Martin wanted it.
Right.
This didn't come only from me. In other words, it was Martin and Hob and the special effects guys, and I ended up writing it out. But it was 18 pages, and but we're sitting there in the editing room, and there's a shot where Pierce is in the archives, and then you see, I forget the guy's name now, but the Russian drive out of the archives in the back of a car. And then the next thing is you see Pierce look at a tank, and then you cut back to the car going on the road, and then you cut to the wall. And so there was this conversation going on about, well, do we have to have a shot of Pierce, of the tank approaching the wall? I mean, this tank appears and crushes through, and Michael Wilson turns and just says, and he looks at Martin and says, let me ask you a question, Martin. Martin says, what? Do you think anyone in the audience is going to know who's in the tank? And Martin says, Martin turned around and said, yeah, you're right. And that's the way it plays. So that it's kind of like you don't see the shot of Pierce actually driving up to the wall or anything. And it's a great cheer moment because the audience actually does know. The audience kind of like, boom, this huge tank comes through. And, so you learn things. You learn about filmmaking as you do these things.
I mean, how surreal was the experience of seeing the finished film after this whirlwind, often, I guess, instinct-driven writing period?
Surreal. It's the only way to. I mean, it wasn't the first movie I had worked on, and it wasn't. I mean, it was clearly big. It's clearly one of the biggest movies. I mean, it's Bond. It's the biggest circus there is.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the premiere at Radio City Music Hall, and I was in the back seat of a car with my wife, and my father and mother were in the front, and we're driving up to Radio City, and it is surreal. And there's the red carpet, and there's Judi Dench, and there's Pierce, and on and on and on and on, and Robbie Coltrane, and my mother looks at me and says, this could lead to something.
You're going places. Yeah.
Yeah. And this after all these years of being said, well, why are you doing this? But, and I actually did turn to her. I said, Mom, right now, this is it. This is the moment. You have to be in this moment because it doesn't get any better than this. And that's kind of the way I looked at it.
Wow.
But it is weird. It's one of the things you realize, one of the things you do come to realize is that how what a huge part of culture the franchise is. And suddenly your ears begin to perk up. All the time you hear, every time Jeff Bezos is described as living the life of a Bond villain, or Barry Diller's island out in the middle of the Hudson River is something a Bond villain would do, or it's like a Bond car, or the number. I remember once, I wanted to use this in another script and I couldn't. I got friendly with some of our security services, and they said that when they do a brute force of password hacks, an absolute, we've got to get into that cell phone, or we've got to get into that. Within the first 100 things they try is first name, last name, 007, 007, first name, last name. I mean,
Wait, that's my password. No.
I know. It's like, are you kidding me? No, they said, yeah, it's in the top 100 of foolish people who like have their first name, then 007 to get into their banks.
A few people might get hacked out of this interview now. I'll just let you know that they can take those complaints to you, right? They can.
Yes, and mine, by the way, you will never guess. It is not have anything to do with Bond or 007.
It's going to be the most obscure reference. It has to be.
But it's weird where you go around and you realize the number of times Elon Musk has been called. He's running in competition with Bezos to be a Bond villain.
Yeah.
And you look at, I mean, Bezos with the wife and the yachts and the rockets and everything else. If I always wanted to do when I was done with the three films, what if I had had another shot and it was time for them to move on, it was okay. I wanted to do Paul Allen, use him as the prototype Bond villain. He was the guy who co-founded Microsoft with, and he had a museum in the shape of a guitar, and he had yachts, and he had planes, and it was like, this guy's living the Bond villain life. Subsequently, Jeff Bezos has far surpassed him.
He's even got the look down. Although I shouldn't say that as a man who's also follically challenged. But talking of media moguls.
Okay, we can move to the next one.
It's a segue. I picked up on it, but Tomorrow Never Dies, and you're unlike GoldenEye. You're coming in, very much, ground zero to build this one up. You're the credited writer on the film. What was that process of being asked back for a second film? Were the discussions happening during GoldenEye to come back? How did you get brought back on, basically?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the truth.
Okay.
This is the truth as opposed to what other people claim. So John Gardner, was it John Gardner? No, Donald Westlake.
Right.
Yeah.
So Donald Westlake wanted the next movie to be written. No, it was John Calley wanted Donald Westlake to write the next movie.
Yeah.
And this is before GoldenEye has come out. So this is like GoldenEye comes out in November 95. In October 95, Calley is going to want to bootleg and get forward. Barbara Michael are also, like guardedly, let's go. And so there's a general agreement, including with this wonderful executive named Jeff Kleeman, that they're going to get Westlake. So Westlake begins to write a treatment. And after GoldenEye has come out, like a month later, I say, I have an idea for the next one. I didn't know about Westlake. Had no idea. And of course, what was it? And I wanted to do Hong Kong, and I wanted to do a media mogul. And well, yeah, the movie did well. Let's see what happens. So Westlake then turns in something about Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong in 1996, now we are. Any writer worth 10 cents is thinking about Hong Kong. I mean, it would be like writing about COVID. I mean, in other words, like the British are going to hand Hong Kong back to the Chinese. So I never see Westlake's treatment, and they decide, no, we're not going to go that way, and we decide we're going to go with the media mogul. So I proceed to start my media mogul story, which is kind of based on observing Rupert and watching Ted Turner. And Rupert owned New York Magazine when I worked there. Rupert Murdoch owned New York Magazine when I worked there. And I had friends there were a bunch of media moguls around. So this wasn't completely, so I kind of knew the field a little bit. But the guy who was interesting to me was Robert Maxwell. Because Maxwell had recently been indicted and died and gone to jail. And of course, this is Maxwell, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father, who's all mixed up in the Epstein stuff. And he died or committed suicide, nobody knows, on his yacht in the Mediterranean. And he was a media baron in. So I thought, well, this is the score. We're going to base it on this guy and not Rupert. Because this guy had all those weird connections. I sit down and I write the movie. One of the things about writing Bond and one of the things about directing Bond is that everybody who is hired to direct, I can't believe I'm going to tell this story, but everybody who's hired to direct Bond gets the job in Los Angeles and says, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world. I'm going to make my Bond movie and I'm going to fly it. And this is it. It's going to be the Bond movie I want to make. Every director says this. Yeah. And the director flies to London and they get to 138 Piccadilly, which is where Bond is. And suddenly they find out, well, we have casting, we've already got casting, we already have special effects, we already have the second unit guy, we already have this, we already have that, and you're welcome to the team, welcome to the family. You don't have final cut, and let's make the movie. And the director inevitably sitting there and says, I'm going to fire the next son of a bitch who walks through that door. And the next son of a bitch who walks through that door is always the writer. And so it's kind of like I always had great sympathy. I mean, I had this conversation with Michael Apted about because this is the way he felt, and this is the way Campbell I can't say, but Roger Spottiswoode was the same thing. And I mean, it was a funny conversation. They were not embittered about any of this, but it was the reality of it that you're not going to really make your own Bond movie. These are producer-driven movies. And Roger then wanted to change the script. Well, not wanted to change the script, but Roger for whatever reasons. And I like the movie Roger made, and I like Roger. So don't take this any way the wrong way. But Roger, for whatever reasons, wanted to fly in 4 of his friends or acquaintances in the studio acquaintances to have a weekend round table on this. And I got one ringer. I could have one friend of mine come. And they spent the weekend tearing apart the script and suggesting this, that, and that. And on the following Monday morning, when they all went home, Barbara said, well, that was a waste of money. And because none of it got used. There was one thing that kind of came out of it, but Roger and I had already agreed that we were going to use Michelle Yeoh. I mean, it was already the movie's going to be set in Asia, and Michael Wilson and his sons David and Greg were huge Michelle Yeoh fans. So anyone who says that I'm responsible for bringing in Michelle Yeoh or it was my idea, no, Michelle Yeoh was on Michael's radar for years. On Sundays, occasionally, I would go with Michael to watch Hong Kong movies down in London's Chinatown. I mean, this was not anything as crazy as it sounds. And so a couple weeks go by, and I knew this was coming, and I get fired, and they hire Nick Meyer, who then goes off, throws away the script altogether, totally throws away the script, and writes a different movie about population control.
Yeah.
Having nothing to do with nothing, zero, nothing. And he may have been responsible, but I don't think so, that there was a legal challenge for my name for the media mogul, which was Harm's Way. And he may have come up with Carver. Michael Wilson told me Michael came up with Carver. I don't know. But that was a legal thing, that we couldn't use the name of the media mogul that I wanted to use. And I wasn't upset about this. This is what happens. You comes up with names and legal checks it and says you can't do this. You don't fight those battles. And Nick turns in the script and I think is fired 4 hours later. And then I am brought back. And I am brought back to kind of do a course correction on some things that have gone on. Jonathan Pryce wanted Jonathan Pryce, who was terrific to work with, felt that they had lost the character, so it was, then I was on the picture for the whole time until until post-production when we were doing Wild Lines. So, I mean, there's a reason why I have sole credit. There's a writer named David Wilson who at one point was brought in to do some action sequences. He did like the Halo jump. Absolutely. But it was you go back to the beginning, which was a media mogul wants to create a war. And, this is the funny part of it. The funny part of it is, of course, I set out to do a movie about a media mogul, and somehow, don't ask me how, but there's a stealth boat in it. So it's like, how did we get there? I don't know, but it's a Bond movie.
I had no complaints.
It doesn't seem that outrageous these days that these people might have stealth boats, let's be honest.
No, but working on that movie, like there were very funny, weird things that happened. And the weirdest thing that happened was one afternoon we were in Bangkok together, and Michael, I was gonna have a drink with Michael. It was a rough shoot. It was 106 degrees, and there was creative friction on the set. And Michael calls me up to kind of like smooth something over to his hotel room, which is the 40th floor of a hotel. And he's like in what I begin to call the Mobutu suite, the deposed dictator suite, where you go in and you can see, well, that's where the finance minister was, that's where the mistresses were, there's the nursery, and you're going further and further and further, and there's the dining room table for 40, and this is at the top of a hotel. And Michael and I walk out and haven't really said anything to each other, and he hands me a Jack Daniels, and he has a Jack Daniels, and we're overlooking the Chiang Mai River, and the sun is setting in Bangkok. And we really haven't said anything. And suddenly we look over, and there are two helicopters chasing each other up the river. And the first one fires a rocket at the one in front of it. It misses. The helicopters dive off and go into a neighborhood, and we see some explosions, some smoke coming out. And we're both watching this. I look at Michael, and I finally break the silence and say, "Are those ours?"
Yeah.
Michael looks at me and takes a drink and says, "I hope so." And that's what it's like working on those movies. I mean, it's like, it turns out, yes, they were ours. And so some of the stuff didn't get used, and Victor Armstrong was shooting something, but it was like, that's how big and weird this stuff is.
There could have been an invasion going on 8 blocks east, and you're like, it could be a Bond film. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And we've got our own weapons. We're fine.
Wow.
But also on that, go ahead.
Well, I have to ask you about. I'd read that originally the Bond girl was going to be a character named Sydney, who was an associate, was the daughter of Carver's associate. Is that completely fiction? Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah. Her name was Sydney Winch, and she was
Okay.
going to be, and she was somehow related to Bond, and she was somehow related to Carver, and in the next draft I did, I got rid of her and shifted it around, and kind of the Terry Hatcher role came into it, where, in other words, it's like this. There's a lot of ingredients, and you're mixing them up, and so kind of like the woman who's going to be Bond, who's going to say that she's Bond's equal, which every woman who has ever played that role against Bond is obliged to give an interview with. Well, this time I'm his equal, and I always wanted to do a clip reel of that.
There's a lot of them. There's a lot.
This time she's his equal, and this time she gives back as good as she gets, which is also funny. I mean, it's also funny reading about that they're going to change Bond for the next movie, but at the same time they're talking about Sydney, what's her name? Sydney Sweeney for the girl. So wait a minute, you're going to change it, but we're back to the girl. So
Yeah.
So Michelle kind of became in the rejiggering of the whole thing. So Michelle became part of the role that was supposed to be Sydney Winch. I really forget, but I remembered the name because I liked the name.
Well, maybe they can use that one day. One day.
There's a whole bunch of Bond names we can never use that we have all stored away.
There's got to be a file somewhere that's just like a list of Bond names and a list of Bond villains that you just can't touch, but are gold.
Can't touch. I'll only say one, which is I won't get in trouble because it's okay, but it was going to be there was going to be some, I forget which movie it was, but there was going to be an Asian guy. No, maybe a Filipino guy. I don't remember, but it was going to be a guy whose name was going to be Manuel Hung. And
Jeez.
It was never. I mean, it was just a joke in the office, but it was never.
Yeah.
I mean, it was never.
That feels like a Roger Moore character. Like I can hear Roger Moore saying, "Manuel Hung."
Good afternoon.
Can I help you?
Yes, my name is Bond. James Bond. I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
A woman?
I mean, I never considered using it. It never. I'm not responsible for Christmas Jones. That's all I can say.
Hey, we're Christmas Jones defenders. We've had Denise on. We'll stick up for
I
Denise
love her.
anytime. She's great.
She's great.
Well, okay, that spins us into The World Is Not Enough. Your third and final Bond film you worked
Third
on.
and final.
You're coming back again. Where did that conversation take place? Was it a different conversation to last time? Was it an easier transition?
No, it was a later conversation. It was that Neil and Robert, who first let's talk about Purvis and Wade, because
Sure.
they are because in the history of the series, when the writers who are important get written, it's going to be Maybaum, who we all stand on his shoulders. There is no Bond without Maybaum.
Yeah.
And every time anyone says, oh, you need to go back to the book, they don't understand that even Fleming himself liked what Maybaum did more than Fleming did, because there was a conversation where Fleming turned to Maybaum and said, I like your Bond better than mine. Because Maybaum is the one who gave Bond his wit. But right after Maybaum comes Purvis and Wade. They did the transition. They did the most successful Bond movie ever. And these guys are great writers. And I have huge, huge, huge respect for them. And so in this case, Purvis and Wade wrote the first draft of the first draft of The World Is Not Enough. What's his name? The director. Good, help me.
Michael Apted.
Michael Apted takes the flight from Los Angeles to New York. Think he's going to make his own Bond movie. The first son of a bitch who walks through the room, Purvis and Wade, and gone. And it's kind of like being the first writer on a Bond movie. It's kind of like being the drummer in Spinal Tap. And then it's just, you're finished, thanks. And then Michael hired his then wife / girlfriend to do the next draft. And it didn't work. And she's a really, really good writer and a very sweet person. And I was called that they felt that they felt that something was missing. And it wasn't about being a man or a woman or anything like that. It was just, we're not there yet. I mean, these things happen. This is it's very easy for Barbara and Michael to say, and Apted to say, we're not there yet. And so they called and they said, come over and come back. And I worked on the script and fixed a whole bunch of things and changed a whole bunch of things. But again, none of it exists without Robert and Neil. Stuff that probably if they had been given the opportunity and the time and everything else, they would have done on their own. Which is a funny story. If I assume we have time, I can tell you a funny story about. So this thing opens up and it makes no sense at all. The movie makes the opening sequence of this movie makes no sense at all. There is a woman in a bright red leather jacket on a speedboat on the Thames in broad daylight in the center of London with a .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the back deck of the machine gun across from MI6, and no one has noticed.
Stop! It isn't finished! Stop!
Right.
She's just bobbing in the water in the bright red leather jacket with a boat with a .50 caliber machine gun. And then, of course, at that particular moment, Bond comes sailing out. Okay, So then what starts is a chase down the Thames. And it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And finally, she comes to, I guess it was O2. It was, where was it? They came to O2. It wasn't it where the
It was
final
the
thing-
Millennium Dome then, but the
Yeah,
O2
the
now.
Millennium Dome. Yeah, so they come to Millennium Dome, and I'm looking at this and I'm reading it. I'm going, well, what's he doing? I don't get this. I don't get this. So one of the things I end up fixing on that is it's a scene where he's saying to her, yelling to her, where she's going up on a somehow and he's saying to her, "Stop! I can help you. I can save you. You don't have to do this."
Mm-hmm.
And we see helicopters coming in, and she's about to die.
Listen to me! You can't get away! We can make a deal. Just tell me who's behind this! Who you're working for! Don't do it! Don't blow us up! I can protect you! Do you understand? I can protect you!
Not from him!
And so the scene didn't have a point. It was like they had left out that part of it. And I don't know actually if they had left out that part of it or it had gotten cut in the 700 iterations of it. But it was one of the things that I needed to fix. And we're talking about like a little thing here. Again, this is the beginning of the movie. There were lots of other things that needed to be fixed, rejiggered, played with, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so Michael Wilson invites me to the cutting room at Pinewood to look at this. And I go look at it and okay. And about 3 minutes before, about 30 seconds before they're about to get to the Millennium Dome, suddenly there's a cut to the control panel in Bond's boat and it says torpedoes, and Bond hits torpedoes and 2 torpedoes come out and miss the speedboat that she's on with a 50 caliber machine gun. And I'm looking at this and I stop, Michael. Wait a minute, Michael. The torpedoes were not in what I wrote. What's with the torpedoes here, Michael? In about 30 seconds, he's going to be saying, "Stop, I can help you. Don't do this." But going back 20 seconds before, he's firing torpedoes at her. This doesn't make any sense. What are we doing here? Michael Wilson leans back in his chair, takes a minute and thinks about it and turns to me, and with infinite patience, like the patience that you would deal with a 4-year-old child or a screenwriter, which are often the same thing, he looks at me, leans back in his chairs, and he says, "Brucey?" I said, "What, Michael?" He says, "Those are non-lethal torpedoes." And the truth is that at that moment, I realized I was in the presence of true cinematic genius. And I laughed, Michael laughed, and but you know, it's like, it's a Bond movie, okay.
We're not science fiction, we're in fact science fact.
So I then went through and fixed Robbie Coltrane's stuff, and I was fortunate to become friendly with Mr. Coltrane, but I knew him from GoldenEye and wrote the role in GoldenEye for him. And he was cast before the role was written. It was Campbell showed up when Michael came to my office one afternoon with Robbie, and I had met Robbie because another friend of mine had made a movie with him, and called Nuns on the Run, and Jonathan Lynn, or someone I knew, and so it was really easy to write for him, and he was like this great gentle giant and was so much fun, and working with Robbie, Jonathan Pryce, Dame Judith Dench, all of them took whatever I did and knocked it out of the park and took it someplace that I could have only hoped for, and made it their own. I mean, particularly Judi Dench always did that, and so we were lucky to be working with that grade of actors. Mm-hmm. Although one of the things people don't know is that you get credit for it, but they're the ones who really brought it home. The original. Go ahead.
Well, I would remember that Pierce Brosnan was quite vocal in terms of interviews of wanting to push the Bond character forward. This is his third film. Is that something that maybe you're hearing at this point that that Pierce would like to do? Like because you have him injured, you have a more vulnerable Bond this time. Was that because of the actor would liking to explore the character more, or just something that organically came through the writing process?
I don't know. I mean, he was injured. Obviously, they really pushed it in the next one where he had been in prison.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pierce always talked. Pierce always wanted to push the character forward. Pierce wanted, I think, Pierce always talked about rolling back the layers of the onion. I mean, that was his thing. And
Yeah.
you do the best you can. You try and do what you can.
Underneath this veneer of sophistication and gloss, I think, is a pretty strange man, if you think about it. Someone who drinks as much as he does and kills people as much as he does, and the women he goes through. And maybe next time out we can even go a little bit further in that area.
On the other hand, there's a stealth boat. I mean, here we are.
Sure.
There are non-lethal torpedoes.
Yeah, there's a stealth boat, there's non-lethal torpedoes, and that helicopter is going to cut that BMW in half. I mean, you do the best you can.
Well, you did mention Christmas Jones, and you said that's not a you creation. Is the Christmas happening more than once a year line at the end got anything to do with you?
The Christmas only comes once. I thought Christmas only came once a year as mine.
Always wanted to have Christmas in Turkey.
Is that a Christmas joke?
For me? No. No.
So isn't it time you unwrapped your present?
Oh, I think so.
But I don't remember why. I could have fixed it. First of all, Denise Richards was a real sport.
Yep.
And she was great, and she was fun to work with, and she's very funny and very charming and very playful and a very sweet person. And she was fun, and I really like her. And I think she would probably call herself this too. She's a ditzy valley girl kind of in a way who and she's enormously likable. And if you meet her in person, she's kind of charismatic and great. I could have fixed the questions about how does someone who looks like that end up as a nuclear scientist, he was a nuclear scientist, I think. And we ran out of time, and I had written the scene to fix it, and we didn't do it. But it was going to be an explanation it was going to be a slightly, when you have not problems like that, but when you have that kind of credibility questions where you knew that they're going to come. Yeah. How is this chick in shorts dressed like that in the middle of Azerbaijani, a nuclear scientist?
I pulled the plutonium out of the one inside. You can detonate the triggers now.
Okay.
Look, our IDA physicist. Don't bother. Not interested in man. Take my word for it. This year we decommissioned 4 test sites. Not even a glimmer.
Are you here for a reason? Or are you just hoping for a glimmer? And you are?
Mikhail Arkhov, Russian Atomic Energy Department. Miss?
Dr. Jones. Christmas Jones. And don't make any jokes, I've heard them all.
You plant a flag on it, and you have her make a joke about it. And we just didn't get to do it. I mean, it might have helped. So when I say Christmas Jones, the Christmas Jones, it's like I get more grief for Christmas Jones than I do for Xenia Onatop.
Right.
Which is odd. I'd never heard any bad feelings towards Xenia Onatop. It's funny you bring that one up, but Christmas Jones is the one we hear about a lot, having spoken to Denise ourselves. I think she gets a completely unfair rap for that film and that performance. She did what was written for her and delivered it well in my book.
Yes. She's the Bond girl in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And she delivered the performance, and she was a good sport about it.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's also really difficult when you have a character like Elektra looming so large in the film as well, to also rise up to meet that challenge as well.
Yeah, and it's really funny, the difference between the two of them. If you walk into a restaurant, and I've done this obviously, but you walk into a restaurant with Denise Richards and people notice, but you walk into a restaurant then with Sophie Marceau and the restaurant falls dead silent. She was like otherworldly. She was otherworldly. So it was an interesting contrast between the two of them to spend time with both of them. And once again, Sophie Marceau was a good sport also. Very, very sweet woman.
The question, before I take us on to our next subject, a couple of wrap-up questions about Bond films and Bond and things you've done then is, Die Another Day happened. Were you ever involved in that, or was there ever a discussion?
No, I was not involved with Die Another Day. They had moved on.
Mm-hmm.
We were friends. Don't read anything into that other than that they had moved on. And these days people come back and say, well, why didn't they hire you again? Why didn't they bring you back? Well, because they had moved on. They had moved on from Maybaum at a certain point. They had moved on from various people. And also, I was living in Los Angeles and had just had kids, and Neil and Robert, who again are terrific writers, are in London. And these things are 18-month projects. And putting me up in a hotel in London is not cheap. That's part of it. That's part of it. And through all of it, I have forever remained friends with Barbara and Michael. And Barbara's like a sister to me. And so there's no ill will here or anything like that. There's nothing like that. And in fact, what I used to joke was that, so around the turn of the century, I started working on the video games, and I did 6 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the way I used to describe it is that, and I don't know if this joke will play in London, but I used to describe it, well, I'm still in the mafia, but they moved me out of Manhattan, and I've now got the New Jersey cigarette concession. So it's kind of like, I'm still doing it, and it was fun. So we did, and one of them, there was one that's called Bloodstone.
Yep.
That I worked on with both Michael's sons, David and Greg. And although I think Bloodstone was driven primarily by Greg, both of them were. That was supposed to be a 2-part series with the hope that we could turn that one into a movie. It didn't happen. There were contractual things between Eon and the various distributors. Like, who was that? That one wasn't E3. That one was Activision. But and it was fun at the time to work on. So I didn't quite give it up, and it gave me the opportunity. And it was a lot of fun to work with. It's always fun to work with Pierce, but it was a lot of fun to work with Sean, and Daniel did one of them. So that's what happened. And then eventually, but also what happened with the Bond games is that finally the movie business came to realize that these are different audiences, and that it takes 18 months to write a game or to produce a game, and it takes 18 months to make a movie, and the film people are very protective of what they're doing, and they don't want the scripts out there and everything. And the truth of the matter is that on the billboards that you saw at the turn of the century, which was coming October 7th, see the movie, buy the video game, people weren't buying the video game because The standards were different. They were wondering, the people who were going to see buy video games wanted to know what was the rendering engine, what was this, what was that, and it was a whole different mindset. And yes, they would go to see a Bond movie, but it didn't necessarily translate that they would buy a Bond. It didn't bring in people to buy a Bond video game because those people wanted to know, is it any good? Not on the story, but on the game mechanic. Well, that's why you saw the end of day-date video games and movies. It wasn't just Bond that happened to. Across the board, you used to see Superman buy the game, see the movie. You don't see that. You don't see, 20 years ago, you would have seen F1 see the movie, buy the racing game. And you didn't. But the one thing that is funny is that about this whole experience is that now, all these years later, if I meet someone who grew up who was a teenager or later, around 1997, they'll say, I'll get introduced, oh, he wrote GoldenEye. And inevitably the young kid will say, the movie or the video game? And I'll say, the movie. And they say, oh. It was the first person shooter where you could play with your friends.
Yep.
And it's some kind of real cultural thing for that generation. It always makes me laugh.
You're talking to one of them right here.
Okay, so you too.
Yeah, I have
Both,
four brothers, and we had an N64, 4 controllers, and we would just rotate the 5 of us. And I think I played. I've lost days of my life, months of my life, probably, to GoldenEye 007.
As have I. That was our routine. We started playing near the end of my high school, but once I graduated, my friends and I would go and get pizza and play GoldenEye from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 2 in the morning, multiple days in a row.
And right there, gentlemen, is the problem one confronts as a Bond writer. I am never going to be able to provide that experience for you. Right. And we used to in the reviews, I always used to say that most of the reviewers had their first sensual experience watching a naked girl painted gold. I am never going to be able to evoke that spirit in your pants through this movie, and that's what I am up against. I mean, you're kind of aware of this stuff as it goes on. I'm sorry, there was my benchmark as a Bond writer, which I didn't reach. My failure was that when I look back at the franchise, and Barbara always joked that the only movie I ever saw was Thunderball. Because for me, Thunderball is, look, I love GoldenEye, Goldfinger. I love From Russia with Love. There's something, and maybe it's because I had come of age at precisely the right moment. But there are so many things in Thunderball, and when you look at every death in that is unique and amazing. And there is a scene in Thunderworld where, what's her name? I forget her name. She's in the tub.
Fiona Volpe.
Yes. And this was the one. If I always said, if I could get here, I'll be okay. And Bond comes in and she covers up and she says something about, get me something to put on. And it's just a cut to him holding up a pair of sandals.
Yeah.
And without a word, it is totally evocative of the character, the situation, and his life. And I always thought that was the one. In other words, if I could only ever do something as beautiful, as brilliantly screenwritten as that. And that was Maybound.
Oh.
Hello.
Aren't you in the wrong room, Mr. Bond?
Not from where I'm standing.
Since you're here, would you mind giving me something to put on?
All right.
Allow me to just back at you for a second. And this is coming from someone whose introduction to Bond was GoldenEye, and the film that made me a Bond fan was Tomorrow Never Dies. So you're talking to the generation that you influenced a little bit here. And you may not listen to me if you don't want to. That's absolutely fine.
I would love to listen to you. Are you kidding? Please.
There is
Tell
a
me I'm
moment.
wrong.
Well, there is a moment in GoldenEye, and people can quote me on this, where it's in the Monaco scene where he's chasing Xenia, and he's going through the boat, and he beats up a couple of henchmen. He uses a towel to beat them up at one point, and then they're both knocked out, and then he wipes his brow with the towel, throws it down, and keeps on running. And that, for me, was a moment that will define, coming from you and your co-writers on GoldenEye, that might have been your exact thing. You influenced that for me. You gave me that moment.
That's very sweet of you to say, and I thank you. I will take the compliment. I mean, it's like, yes. So for me as a writer, it was the sandals, but there's a scene where Bond is in the tank, where Pierce is in the tank, and he straightens his tie. That always makes me laugh. It's so Bond. This is what we grew up with, all of us. Yeah. And this is why we're here today.
Well, I always think of the shot where Bond in GoldenEye is setting the mine, and the gunshots go off right near his head, and it's the slightest tilt of his head away. It's not a I've got to move. It is just the slightest, calculated, not quite. Okay, back to what I'm doing, and you never lose that focus on what he's doing. And I go that. Because the thing is, there's Bond that's playful, but there's also the element of Bond that I think appeals to. I mean, I was, 9 or 10 when I discovered Bond. He was the coolest character I'd ever seen. And it's moments like that in GoldenEye that jumped out to me even at the time.
That was always the thing that you guys, and obviously you both felt that about it. And I felt that earlier. He was the coolest guy alive. Wanted, it was the advertising thing about every man wants to be him and every woman wants to be with him. But he was all of our definitions of cool. For you, it was Pierce. And for me, it was Connery. And for a whole group of other people, it was Roger Moore. And for a whole new group of people, it's Daniel. And we can appreciate all of them in the roles. But it's the one you saw first. It's the one who spoke to you that you come away with.
I want to take us on to a subject that one of the reasons it brought you here today, but I'll leave Bond, your works of Bond in the film world and the video game world with this final question. Looking back on the contributions you did with the video games and the films, what's the one thing that you are most proud of?
I want to say Judi Dench. Judi Dench.
Yeah.
But Tomorrow Never Dies was 25 years ahead of its time. And the amount of times now I have hear people saying, my God, Tomorrow Never Dies is an entirely original film. It's not based on anything Fleming did.
Yeah.
So in a kind of weird way, that movie also has sole credit on it. But so it's those two things.
And I remember at the time, there was some snickering about the villain in Tomorrow Never Dies, and you were ahead of the curve because no one laughs at that character anymore.
No, I mean it's any one of them. There's any one of a number of people who are this guy now.
Yeah. Whether it's
and any one of a number of people in the tech world. It was. This is part of the challenge going forward about who's going to be the villain, and also I take pity on who's ever going to write the next film, because sometimes at night you'll sit there and you'll think, well, if I were doing that, what would I do? And it occurs to me, I've just finished writing rewriting an intrigue movie for the Korean director Park Chang-woo, and one of the things in it is about ubiquitous surveillance. There's no such thing anymore as a secret agent. I mean, if I walk out of my house in Los Angeles, there are 18 cameras on my block.
Yep.
And I think that's a really tough thing to overcome. I mean, and that's fortunately I'm not getting paid to face that challenge. But I mean, I don't mean to sound so glib about it, but it's actually, there's always a trope of spy movies, which you guys have talked about, that someone comes in, the controller character or the M character, the Q character comes in, and we've created a backstory for you. We've you're a banker with Barclays, and you were married, and your wife, and they do the whole thing, and here's the pictures, and you can't do that today.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody who doesn't have a digital, who has not left huge digital fingerprints everywhere.
Mm-mm.
And so when you sit down to write that movie, it's you're gonna have a bigger problem than those are non-lethal torpedoes.
It's something we've faced a lot when we review a lot of modern spy movies, as they tend to default to tropes that made sense in the 1960s but don't really hold up now.
Well, that's one of the. As long as we're here, if you guys have a couple more minutes, I'm good.
Of course.
One of the things is that one of the problems that confronts every spy movie now is ubiquitous surveillance, and tech. And so the default position now is to fall back and do the 60s, because in the 60s I don't have anybody with a cell phone. I don't have instantaneous connections. I don't have instantaneous conversations. And so in some way it makes the movie more interesting. With everything on with your phone now, you have every connection in the world. I'm not telling you anything that everybody who's watching this doesn't know. So you make your job a hell of a lot easier by placing the movie in time back before ubiquitous communications and ubiquitous surveillance. So it's a tough thing to overcome. And I actually did talk to Cubby about this. We had a conversation once about a period piece. Everybody says, well, why don't they do a period piece? And I actually had the conversation with Cubby Broccoli about a period piece. And the conversation was, well, you don't do a period piece because it's going to look ridiculous. He didn't use those words. I'm going to paraphrase him here. But it was, you can't do a period piece because the people around Bond have to marvel at the technology, the stuff, the toys. We call them the Q toys. So if you're looking at this now and suddenly there's a tracker, he didn't use this example, but if everyone around him is saying, oh my God, it's a cell phone, what is that? You're out of the movie instantly. And you're also then dealing with the separate universe problems of if you did Goldfinger today, you would wonder about, well, a whole bunch of people died. How come nobody reported on this? As opposed to, I'm talking about if you went and did Goldfinger as a period piece.
Yeah.
The leap of faith that you have to do. I think Tom Cruise confronts this all the time, and so does and that's why all of those movies, and that was Cubby's rule on the technology, which is that Bond and the villain have access to whatever technology at that moment an infinite amount of money can buy.
Yeah.
So in 1963, an infinite amount of money could have bought a radar scanner inside a DB5. So it's one of the tropes and problems of going forward on all of these movies. You look very pensive at the moment, Scott. What were you thinking?
I'm just you're talking, and I'm listening to a man who has influenced the Bond series and is saying it's a tricky thing to deal with, and I know that Bond is in different hands moving forward, and I wonder how those people are going to deal with these problems, and if we have the right people in the right place now. I don't know enough about their work to say that confidently or not, and I hope they can.
My hope is too. I know Amy Pascal. I like Amy Pascal, and I respect Amy Pascal. But There's you know the who was it? It's George Foreman who said everybody is a plan until they get punched in the face.
Correct.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks they can write a Bond movie until you actually sit down and I'm not just talking about as the writer, I'm talking about as the producers, the director, the star. Everyone thinks you can do this until you sit down and you suddenly don't understand the internal rules. You don't understand what quadrant of fantasy does this fit in. What can Bond do and can't do? And when you violate those rules, and Die Another Day, they violated the rule with the invisible car. Bond can't time travel. Bond can't shapeshift. Bond can't. There's a whole bunch of things. And yeah, I know there was an idea that DARPA had done an original car, but it was a little too far. An invisible car, but it was a little too far out. But I can imagine what they are up against. And it starts with, if anybody, I don't advise, whenever I get asked, all of your listeners, don't ever write a spec Bond script. It's a waste of time. But if you were thinking about it, one of the biggest problems, one of the first things you must always confront when you sit down to a blank page on a Bond movie is why Bond?
Right.
Why England? Why Bond? And so that's how you come up with a British media mogul, and that's how you come up with, I mean, that's where it starts. And I just want to put these back in because they're better for me. And so they got to face all that stuff. And it's not, and I have all the more admiration for Barbara and Michael and Neil and Robert and everyone who's ever done this sits down and faces those questions.
Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up a final topic when it comes to your Bond work. And that might be a bit of an announcement for people who don't know this, but there is a second season of a show called 007 Road to a Million coming out very soon. And you are working on that season.
Yes.
You're back with 007.
Well, it's not 007, but it's the franchise.
Road to a Million 007. We'll take
So I went to work on this in, I guess, April 2024. And my job on this was to define who Brian Cox is playing. And for people who haven't seen it, the idea is that you are out faced with Bond-like challenges in a competition against 5 couples to win £1 million. And it is, and I worked specifically with a director named Julian Jones, who is amazingly talented and was my Sherpa through this. And he was the one I worked closest with. And Brian Cox now plays someone at MI6, and it's unspoken that he is the one who was responsible for training agents and kind of, I'm not sure if it actually, if it's not spoken, but he's the one who determines whether or not you have the stuff to become a 007 agent. It's just a small thing through it. He's the one who's running the missions, and he is referred to as the controller. And what the people who produced this were just wonderful. I mean, the second season, I gotta say, the second season is better than the first. And I think because the first was kind of a shakedown cruise, this first season is very good. So let me not, but some of the challenges that the teams are up against, there's, and they're all kind of related back to the movies. So there is a challenge that involves getting to the top of a antenna on a building that we used in Tomorrow Never Dies in Bangkok, and the players end up 400 feet above the ground on an antenna having to do something. And I'm watching this and I'm going, there is no way in the world I would do that. I mean, and then of course it's, well, for £1 million, would you do it? And then you think and you go, well, maybe. I mean, I mean, I'm not good with heights. And funny, Martin Campbell wasn't good with heights either. And so that's why in all of Martin Campbell's movies, there's always the danger of heights. Because
yeah, I hadn't put that together. There you go.
Yeah, he has vertigo. I have vertigo. I can't. It's like I'm not calling in a 60-story apartment, 60 stories up in the air where there's floor to ceiling windows. I get creeped out by that. But not creeped out going 120 miles an hour in a car. So go figure. But this thing has an underwater sequence, and I'm not giving anything away here.
No.
But it's got an underwater sequence, it's got interesting challenges, and it's done in the spirit of Bond. And Brian Cox plays, as I said, the controller and guides you through this. And the contestants, it's 8 episodes, and they do eight or 12 different challenges. And some of them, as a viewer, some of them are really cool about how good a poker player are you? How good can you lie? Can you lie? Can you read a lie? What kind of how good is your intuition? I mean, it tests physical things, but it also tests kind of psychological things. And the contestants come from all walks of life. There's 2 guys who I think the Brits would refer to as gits. And
okay.
And
that's usually us, to be fair. So that's
well, we'll have a pint later, and two kind of YouTube influencers. No, fashion girls, women in fashion, and just a whole bunch of really interesting people who you come to know. And the hope is there's so much that comes down the pike from Amazon that I enjoyed it and I liked working on it and it was fun. And I hope the audience feels the same way. And yeah, it was nice to go back and kind of do that. And even though it's not, it's not it's as the writer. And I'm not the writer. I'm the consulting producer. So that means I get to say things like, well, Bond wouldn't do that, or I didn't get to say that. It was to work. I did a lot of work on thought about what Brian Cox was going to be doing and saying, and some of the dialogue, the things that went on.
So,
go ahead.
Are you with the production like from the start onwards, or do you leave at a certain point? Like, how does it work in terms of a reality competition show?
On this one, Barbara and Michael spent a lot of time picking the contestants with the production company and with Amazon. And then it started shooting, and I guess in like November 23, it was November 23, Eon reached out to me and looked at the numbers. And, you can, the numbers you were given from the streamers about when people tuned out, when we lost the audience, what did we do? And so it was, these are the things, can you look at this? I don't even want to give, this isn't about giving yourself credit because I don't want to give myself credit. I mean, it was a collaborative process about trying to address some of the issues that they had. And I think I know that Barbara and Michael wanted, and Greg, who was running this, wanted just a little more, like, I think it made them feel comfortable. Having someone who knew what the tone of the franchise was. I mean, one of the things you always run up against is people not understanding. Again, this is going to be the thing that confronts the new producers, is not understanding. Like, everyone's first instinct is going to be that Bond is walking down the street and he saves a baby. I can't tell you how many times that comes up. And Barbara, before Die Another Day, Barbara always said there are no babies, there are no children in Bond films. those kind of things. The same way I said to you the rule about Bond can't time travel. So, it's a little bit, it's being there, and I think making everyone feel comfortable, and and kind of giving it some kind of patina. But a lot of people worked on this, and I did not come up with, for example, the quizzes or the places they went, and the people who did it were really, this is the way to think about this, that I think about it, is that, sometimes you turn around and you think, well, so-and-so's only doing reality TV, or so-and-so's only doing a game show, or so-and-so is only doing a chat show. And the truth of the matter is the people who rise to the top of those are the Spielbergs of those industries. There is a Spielberg of reality TV. There is a Spielberg of competition shows. And I think that the company they got here and the people who worked on it, they were great. I mean, I looked at the way this thing was shot and the way it was cut, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I watched season 1 and it was a beautiful looking show. And, I am someone who is a diehard Survivor fan. And when that show is at its best, there's next to nothing better. And so, believe me, I do not hold reality competition at any different level. Like, as you said, a Spielberg in reality competition can make incredible television.
Yeah, and when I'm watching, I'm glad, and I hope you enjoy. I mean, there's some physical stuff in here that, like I said, I would not do for all the money in the world. And you're looking at this and you're going, and it's funny because what you're thinking of is two things. You're thinking of, okay, I know that they're surrounded by stunt people and nobody's going to let them get hurt. But nevertheless, you are scooting down the wires that bring a gondola up the side of a mountain.
Nope.
And you're like the two wires, and you're like figuring out a way to scoot from where the gondola has stopped down to where it ends up. And I'm thinking, not all the money in the world would I be.
So you won't be signing up to be a contestant for season 3, is what you're saying?
No, I'm not going to be a contestant. But if you want, you guys could do it. If there's a season 3.
To be fair, I don't have vertigo. I probably would do those stunts. If I also wouldn't mind £1 million. So there is that.
Well, yeah, that is that, because then you do turn around. Well, if they're really spotters and you're like all wired up and you're not going to fall, sure, I would do it for £1 million.
Yeah, I think maybe when I'm face of it, like the chap diving off the dam in GoldenEye, maybe I wouldn't have made that leap if I was actually faced with it. But seeing it on the screen, I can do that.
Well, watch it for the leap. There's a reference to that very leap.
Okay.
Well, there you go. Well, I just double checked to make sure my figures are right, but the second season of 007 Road to a Million drops on Amazon Prime on August the 22nd, so people can look out for that. I was curious to know, would you like to come back for a third season if they do one?
Sure, never say no.
Correct answer. Well, okay, we have dived into the depths of your Bond journey.
You guys have been great. I didn't figure this was going to go on this long, and I thank you both. You made me feel really comfortable. And
thank you.
And you had great questions. And the thing that there is no Bond franchise without you.
Well, thank you.
It's the fans, and it's the people who love these movies.
Back at you.
And but infinitely, it's it means so much that when you and there's such joy. I mean, I get great joy like from hearing where you said you both played GoldenEye, even though I didn't write the damn thing. But it makes you feel like you actually did accomplish something, and I really thank you.
Well, you say, you compliment us on our questions. The caliber of the work makes the questions easier, right? So it was not hard for us to put together those burning questions we had for you.
And I know we've had you on for this long, and I have one question I can't let you go without asking, because every single person that's been on the show has been asked this question, and I don't like breaking streaks. Okay, and I think the people want to hear from you because you've written some of their favorite spy movies. This is the hot seat question, no prep. Bruce, what is your favorite spy movie of all time?
Third Man.
I was expecting maybe a Thunderball reprisal there, but Third Man.
The Cuckoo Clocks. The Cuckoo Clock.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 Days of the Condor, Third Man. And then, yes, Barbara, Thunderball. And Goldfish. I mean, when I think of it, so I answered the question, but when I think about our movies, for me, it's always the gold standard is always Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball. And I think that GoldenEye is like, if that's like the top tier, like GoldenEye is close to the top of the second tier. But those are the ones that for me were the seminal Bond movies.
I don't think anyone listening would complain with any of your choices. Some of the
Thank
greats.
you.
I'm glad you like the Third Man too, because you're in good company here.
Why? Who else said Third Man?
Oh, that's
We've
a good
had
question.
a few.
We've had a few.
I think. Miriam Dabo said
Yes.
Third Man.
She's great.
She was great. We've definitely had a few. Have you ever ridden the merry-go-round?
No, I haven't.
The Ferris wheel. I always
merry-go-round.
confuse them. Yeah, Ferris wheel.
It's the Ferris. Where's the Ferris wheel now?
It's in Vienna.
It's in Vienna.
No.
I have done it. It's pretty cool. Has not changed much.
That scene. I mean, and he ad-libbed that.
Yeah.
But it's a great movie. Also, you know what? Notorious is a spy movie. Another one. What is that? I didn't see. Is that the poster behind you?
That's the poster for Notorious. That's my favorite Hitchcock spy movie.
Mine too. I mean, when you look at the incredible shot coming down the staircase, and somehow the genius of Alfred Hitchcock being able to create tension around bottles of champagne. You know and it's the greatest MacGuffin ever because they never really explain what the uranium in the wine bottles is about.
There's a trifecta now of you, me, and Brandon Braga, who wrote a lot of Star Trek and Mission Impossible 2 and Star Trek First Contact. All love this film. He has a poster on his wall as well. So we're in a group now, the three of us. We'll start a WhatsApp chat. We'll do it.
I'm very proud and very pleased to be part of that group.
Well, you're also now part of the SpyHards family, so welcome aboard. And Bruce, thank you for taking the time to sit down with us. I'm glad we can make this happen after many years, and you have lived up and exceeded the expectation for all of us, not just me and Cam, but I'm sure everyone listening as well.
Thank you, and you have exceeded my expectations. You were both great.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Goodbye.